Gentlemen, TSM, again, continuing to impress here against the likes of Cloud9, coming out of the gate very strong in this best of 3.
Yeah, they steamrolled them, and it seems like a pattern now that TSM has just been preparing and are just so focused heading into game 1s. You think of their close games as the game 2, which they actually lost 1 to Immortals, and the game 3s have been the game 3 they had is very competitive. But game 1 is just 5 times in a row now been a one side of the fair.
Yeah, so if we take a look at how they did that, how they did craft it, let's start with Champions Select. And of course, C9 being on blue side, they do get that first priority. Interestingly enough, they lock in the Rek'sai with Nidalee still being on the table.
Like I said, a few interesting choices. So obviously the first pick's Rek'sai, signals that Meteos A really wants to play it, and B, they're probably going for a more standard teamfight competition with multiple tanks.
Right.
Also, they got a Bard pick for Bunny, which is another pretty standard play. And like just looking at these team compositions, I think a lot of it favored Cloud9, like if they could stay even and if they could get to team fights. But one of the big differentiating factors was Bjergsen, Zilean, and like Svenskeren's Nidalee, just the way they're able to snowball the game and kind of out-execute. Because I felt like if that game stayed even in gold based on these team compositions with all the squishy and single target damage targets TSM had, they wouldn't have won. But they won it so easily because they snowballed.
I was going to say, and of course, that snowball, it started very early. We saw in the bot lane kind of an unfortunate sequence of events for Cloud9 as Meteos tries to gank for impact in that bottom lane. Had things been executed on 100%, C9 would have been the team with the lead early.
Yeah, Impact, as Ale even mentioned in the cast, made a fair number of errors during this one. Misses the first taunt, which means that now Meteos has to flash to get the knock-up. And then, I actually really like what Impact did after that, because he gets the block down, and then he gets the pass-through on the Q here onto Svenskeren, which means he's doing more percentage true damage, but then he delays his taunt flash. He could have landed that if at the very start of his taunt, he would have flashed to get it, but instead, it allowed time for Svenskeren to predict it. He flashed away. By that time, Bjergsen had roamed down. I mean, if he does the proper taunt flash, it was a greedy play anyway. It probably would have been like 1 for 2 or something. But it ended up just being a disaster and giving a really big early lead to TSM.
Yeah, that early in the game, we saw a little bit over 1K gold lead on the side of TSM. That then allowed them very easily to pick up that initial Infernal Dragon, which, you know, when you only have Doran's Blades, doesn't account for a lot of damage, but just as the game extends, you're looking at a stronger and stronger TSM. From that point onward, it definitely seemed like C9 was playing not to lose, right? We're playing a very safe game, and as you mentioned, their goal was most likely to get to 40 minutes at that point, so that more things equalized. That did not happen. TSM playing very smart around the map. That's our next replay. Watching TSM push down the top lane, forcing C9 into a situation in which they have to make the decision to back and guard their turret or try to push for mid.
And this is more impressive because TSM had just swapped control to this side of the map, and they just suffered casualty on the other side. But knowing they have Hauntzer coming up on Irelia with the ability to TP in, they feel safe making this aggressive move. And honestly, some delayed recalls by Cloud9, which force them into some scary decisions. Biofrost ends up getting hit by the Ashe arrow, which means they can't chain it with Svenskeren. And then when this happens, like, it's still an advantaged fight for TSM because Meteos was flanking around the side. So the play that we saw there seems kind of minor, but they got an extra 2 turrets, they got a kill, and they also secured the Rift Herald right after that for Hauntzer's Irelia, which completely took away any split push threat that Impact could have had on Shen. So a really meaningful moment in the game happening there when the gold was still kind of close.
Yeah, kind of one of the, you know, the lights at the end of the tunnel, one of the hopes for Cloud9 was the fact that even while down in CS, down in gold against Hauntzer's Irelia, Impact was able to handle him, but handing that Rift Herald over just made his job all that much more difficult in the bot lane in that 1v1. So again, unfortunately, C9 a little slow on the uptake to what was a very good macro move by TSM. Can't take anything away from them. If we push a little further into the game, 26 minutes, this is really where the game broke open. If it hadn't been broken open already, this is, you know, Cloud9 making their attempt at getting a pick and choosing this fight, TSM just turning it.
Svenskeren already had a Rod of Aegis and a Giant's Belt here, and Sneaky wasn't very fed, so like that's a play where you think you can burst out Svenskeren, they don't have a chance. Doublelift outplays Bunny FuFuu in the heat of the moment, and then TSM makes the aggressive call to continue the fight. Yes, the Chaos Storm is doing a lot of damage on a Doublelift, but Bjergsen had such high efficiency on his Zilean ultimates this game. They easily revived Doublelift right back up. He then pushes Bunny out of the fight. Sneaky had been zoned out of the fight by a very aggressive Hauntzer. There was actually, even though it was a very scary fight, like I thought Impact did decently that fight, peeling for Sneaky, but it just wasn't enough because TSM was executing at such a high level from a macro standpoint as well as mechanically in these team fights. Like if I'm thinking of the grand scheme of things, like this may have been TSM's best game of the split.
Right, yeah, and it really makes you wonder and fear for all of the other teams in the NALCS that if this team continues to develop this way with what is, you know, a new roster, considering that Biofrost is new, right? So early in the split, that's a terrifying prospect for future games.
Yeah, I mean, even they're talking about it in TSM Legends. Like, that was the happiest episode of TSM Legends, I think. Anyone, like the team, the happy music they were playing the whole time. And it's because the team is in a really good groove right now. They're playing incredibly aggressively. They're taking a lot of risks. And so far, all those risks are working. So I do think that they will definitely hit some roadblocks continuing to play this way, but it hasn't happened yet.
I hope so. It's not an interesting season if teams don't hit roadblocks, all right? I like to see contention in the standings. Anyway, we've got to move to player of the game, Svenskeren, 3-0-9 on that Nidalee. You know, most damage in the game, which is impressive on its own. But on top of that, his awareness to be in the bot lane to help turn that gank. Showing up in the mid lane multiple times to put pressure on Jensen. Although I will caveat that with Jensen was juking and playing about as well as he could have in that mid lane. But when Irelia is showing up, when Nidalee's showing up, he definitely kind of he created chaos for Cloud9.
Exactly, and I think this is one thing, when teams snowball games really quickly, that usually starts with the jungler. He got successful ganks off in bottom lane and mid lane, and then the rest of his team could carry. And especially when you're kind of playing into a Rek'Sai's Nidalee, sometimes it can become more dangerous to counter jungle. You have to be a little bit more fearful for your life because Rek'Sai can close the gap on you occasionally. But Svenskeren never let that happen. Very efficient ganks, and was pivotal in Cloud9 in TSM, snowballing on top of Cloud9, and what I think wasn't as great of a team composition if it was even game team fight.
Now, looking ahead to Game 2, I've just received word that, true to Cloud9 summer split fashion,
swap that support.
Smoothie is back in.
My
so,
goodness.
my question to you, Jat, with this substitution, as well as our evidence from Game 1, changes that we might expect to see out of Cloud9 in order to make it a more competitive Game 2.
Yeah, it's really hard to think, right? And I don't even know if it has to do with the bottom lane. The only thing that I'd want to target right now for TSM, since they have a lot of players that are playing well, is I might as well just ban Lucian or take it away. Like, it's not like it's it's not like it's overpowered or anything, but Doublelift has played it in nearly every game.
Right.
And I feel like he gets these favorite AD carries every once in a while where he just forgets how to play other ones. So if you just get rid of it, like maybe you put him on tilt a little bit and you can get some kills.
Yeah, all right. Well, maybe that's one way to get under TSM's skin. We'll figure out if Cloud9 has come up with any ideas of their own when we come back, see if TSM can take the series or if Cloud9 will send it to a Game 3. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.